Tonight was really about, coming to the community, and we wanted to ask Lisa Pagano to come speak to us and to, to people here because of her experience with gun violence. So many people that are involved with our group have had personal experiences in many different ways, and I can't think of a worse one than the one that you've had and your family has had. And so it's one of the things that makes me work really hard every day on this issue, and I just, we just need to prevent these things from happening, and there's a lot of ways that we can do that, and so we really appreciate your support, and without any further ado, I'll have Lisa come on up.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do, all of the members and all of the volunteers at the Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence. I'm especially amazed by the people that are volunteering their time in going to the State House and testifying who haven't had a personal relationship with gun violence. It really is a passion for these folks, and we're very grateful, obviously. So thank you for that. I have notes, I'm sorry. We'll never be able to finish this without them. I wholeheartedly believe that gun violence is a public health issue that commands the attention and respect of public safety legislation, gun safety legislation, and hope that these community events convince more people to get involved in what literally is the fight of our lives. Specifically, we must band together to convince our legislators that there is no place for high magazine assault rifles in a civilized society. And as in courtrooms, State House, and other government buildings, our community schools and recreation fields are no place for guns, concealed carry, or otherwise. For 46 years, I never gave gun violence a thought. Of course, I'd see crime on the news, homicides, gang violence, drug wars, drug deals gone bad, but to me it was just something that happened far away in big inner cities. It just really happened far away from my little pocket in the world. Growing up in Cranston, my family never had reason to discuss guns. Who had one, who didn't. We never feared that someone in our lovely suburban neighborhood might be carrying a firearm. It just wasn't on our radar. Kids settled heated arguments, maybe with a fist fight. Adults who were pissed off that the kids were walking on the lawn or maybe broke one of their windows with a stray ball. They just hashed it out the old-fashioned way with words, not guns. So let me tell you about my real-life personal story about gun violence. And I warn you, it's descriptive and it's depressing. But it's necessary, because I feel that unless or until someone is personally affected by this life-changing event, it's virtually impossible to comprehend its enormity and change minds. I often wonder that if our lawmakers were affected personally by gun violence, or could fully grasp the concept, we'd have stricter gun legislation. So 11 years ago, on May 18th, 2008, my brother Jim Pagano and his wife were hosting a birthday party for their son Louie, who was turning 9 years old. And before I go further, I just want to introduce, my family is here. My sister-in-law, Adriana Pagano, Jimmy's widow, my sister Jean, and my mother Rose. So I'm speaking for me, but I'm speaking on behalf of my entire family, because this truly was a family horror. Anyway, it was a lovely spring day, which drew all the children living on this charming cul-de-sac out to play baseball and other games on the street. Louie's birthday. The Italian food was cooking inside the home as we all arrived around 2 p.m. to celebrate Louie's birthday. It was pure joy to see all the kids playing outside with Louie and his celebration, and it truly was a scene out of a Norman Rockwell painting. So as I'm indoors, chatting with family over a plate of spaghetti, I saw my niece, Jim and Dree's daughter, run into the house from outside in a panic, anxiously telling her dad that the next door neighbor was screaming, cursing, and threatening the kids because he noticed that a tennis ball that they were playing with accidentally hit the back fender of his wife's car. She was visibly upset, my niece, so Jim went outside to check things out and speak to the neighbor about his language and overreaction to this incident. My dad went along with him. All of us dropped what we were doing inside and out of sheer curiosity, followed them outside. Jimmy knocked on the neighbor's door a couple of different times. The neighbor didn't answer, so Jimmy turned to walk away. Suddenly, and we're all in the front stoop watching all of this happen, suddenly the neighbor just decided to open the door. Hold on. I said we were sitting out on the stoop. Forgive me, I'm nervous. We were sitting on the stoop, and when we were looking outside to see Jimmy going next door, we kind of just thought it was going to be a typical neighborhood spat, you know, that would just end with some words with some kids it was like kids hanging around. It was just going to be like a little neighborhood spat. But what happened next was unspeakable, unimaginable, and still dizzying to this very day. The neighbor opened his door. Jim went back to the door to confront him, shouting, "Stop screaming at the kids," a couple of times over. The neighbor flipped Jim off and told him to go F himself. Jim threw a punch at him. From the front step, the neighbor reached for his gun, apparently the one he walks around the house with, and Jim turned to run away, and the neighbor shot him in the back as he was running. We all watched in shock as Jim ran from him, but the neighbor chased him outside down his driveway, firing more shots at him, while all of the neighborhood kids stood around in pure shock, eventually running for their lives. It is a true miracle that not one of those children was hit by a stray bullet. Jim fell to the ground at the end of the neighbor's driveway, having succumbed to the gunshots. The neighbor stood over him with the gun pointed at him and said, "You're all done, Jim." At some point, he retreated back into his house. Most of us were whisked away to the police station, and Jim was rushed to the hospital. The emergency room doctors tried to save him from the massive internal bleeding caused by a hollow point bullet through the back that severed Jim's aorta, pancreas, and liver. He died on the table. And I'm sure the good doctor who's going to follow me will tell you more as an ER doctor how this is probably something that happens every day in her life as an emergency room doctor. And she could probably speak further to this horror. What followed that horrific day is what I call collateral damage and the ripple effect. By the time I got to the hospital after spending 2 hours at the Cranston police station making this statement, Jim was gone. I remember walking down a long hallway in the hospital, unsure of what I would find out about my brother. When he left the house, he was alive. When I arrived at the small, sterile, bright room in the hospital, my mom, dad, and sister-in-law were hysterical. They told me my brother was dead. Coming in behind me was my niece, Jim's daughter, 12 years old at the time. All I remember her saying is, as she looked at her mom, "Daddy's dead?" We were ushered into another room where one by one members of the family attending the party came in. The Attorney General came in and at one point it reassured us that he would put the best people on the case in pursuit of justice. That was just a blur. I felt like I was watching a movie. Over the next couple of days, we all walked around like zombies, going through the motions in total shock, unable to form words or thoughts. Did we really see Jimmy gunned down at Louie's birthday party? Did that really happen? Was it a nightmare? No time to process. There was a funeral to plan, children to comfort, and many calls to make on behalf of our children, aged 5 to 12, all shook up. Following the funeral, it was time to get into murder trial mode. Witness statements, comments on the news and on social media about whose fault it really was that Jim was shot, as if he deserved it for confronting the neighbor about the cursing and the tennis ball. The neighborhood children were questioned about all that they saw that day, 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds. My nephew and his friend jumped 2 fences and hid in a shed 2 blocks away from the scene to escape the scene and find safety. Kids were traumatized that Sunday and until this day struggle and try to find ways to cope with what they saw. There have been various counselors, trauma specialists, psychiatrists, medications. Members of our family have suffered depression, anxiety, alcohol misuse, PTSD, school struggles, truancy, and rage. That is the ripple effect. And once the murderer was convicted, it was time for victim impact statements at sentencing. I'll never forget my niece recalling in tears before the judge how she would never forgive herself for being the one to tell her father about the neighbors yelling that day. The guilt followed her, and to this day she does not discuss what happened to her father, as if to block it out is the only way to survive. My nephew has never come to terms with his trauma. His father was gunned down in full view at his birthday party. Birthdays following were low-key. It's the anniversary of his father's murder. As adults, we have done our best to nurture and protect our wounded kids, at times neglecting our own care, and at times overcompensating our kids in the spirit of loving them. My brother's murderer, if you can believe this, was a cop, a retired Providence police officer. Truth be told, he was brought onto the police force through someone who knew someone who knew someone. You get the idea. He was reluctantly brought on. The chatter at the time was that he was gun happy, all too eager to use force. This made him a liability, but politics prevailed. After a very brief stint on the force, 6 months in fact, he injured his knee and sought to retire on a lifetime disability. The force was delighted to let him go and get him off their hands. So off he goes into retirement with the automatic privilege of a concealed carry permit, angry with his fate, and to sit home for the next 15 years yelling at kids in the neighborhood until he finally got his chance to use his beloved gun. Concealed carry gun holders are screened at courthouses and all other public government buildings in Rhode Island. Why? To take the risk of accidental or purposeful gun danger out of the equation. So ask yourself, why is it okay for concealed carry weapons to be allowed in schools? These are public buildings designed for the purpose of educating our young citizens. Why? The gun enthusiasts will say that concealed carry gun holders are the single line of defense in the event of a mass school shooting. Really? I'm not convinced. I witnessed a concealed carry gun holder commit murder because he was peeved about a tennis ball hitting his car. He was having a bad day. And I have serious doubts that a single firearm is going to take down a mass shooter, so why not just take the gun out of the equation? So why do I share my personal story with you? My brother was a 44-year-old firefighter, a husband, father, brother, son, and a good friend to many. He was brutally taken, and nothing I can do can bring him back. I've relived all of the I should haves, what ifs, and whys. We've survived each and every holiday, anniversary, mass, birthday, and special occasion since the murder happened, where tears of grief were shed. Children were struggling with the gaping hole of loss, where bad habits were formed in response to the trauma, the PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks, but trying to make sense of such a senseless death, the new normal. I share my story because what else can I do with this event? What can I do with all the grief, the turmoil, the trauma, the anger, the pain? So, in 2011, a few years after the murder, my family established the Jim Pagano Foundation, a charitable organization designed to honor his legacy and further the values that Jim deemed important: healthy, confident children with strong character. The foundation was a positive way for us to all cope with the loss. It grants money to Cranston organizations that help kids build courage, confidence, and character building through academics, athletics, social and emotional wellness, and cultural arts. Over the years, we have granted over $100,000 in college scholarships and capital investments to local community sports organizations, mindfulness and conflict resolution programs in the elementary schools, trauma assistance, and certain arts programs. Our mission is to promote future heroes and leaders just like my brother Jim, and we have been extremely fortunate to have our Cranston neighbors generously support us from the beginning. The only other thing we can do with all of this grief and anger is to share our story in the hopes that folks will realize that all of us live in a new time, where there are more guns in the country than people, that you don't know who of your neighbors have a gun, who of your kids' teachers in the classroom have a gun, who is going to get angry about something trivial and just snap. I share my story because I hope to get more folks involved in the fight for common sense gun laws that will reduce these tragedies from happening to another family. I hope that my Cranston neighbors will join me and the powerful, hardworking Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence in promoting common sense gun laws to our legislators and to the public to protect our communities, our neighbors, our kids, our families, and ourselves. I thank you all.